Welcome to Breaking Financial Chains, where we combine practical money guidance with emotional healing to help you break free from financial limitations. I'm Tanya Riverson, your financial wingwoman.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Breaking Financial Chains. I am so happy that you're here. Today's episode is about one of the services that I offer. It's called the Money Rage Room, and it's a technique that I use with clients in short, sharp bursts, but I wanted to talk about it generally as a technique around letting go of financial frustrations and to share with you a little bit about this technique and also how to set one up for yourself, how to set up some habits around letting go of financial frustrations and rage. So the theme for this episode is around emotional release, nervous system regulation, and rewriting the money narrative that you might not realize that you've been carrying for a long time, if not your whole life. Following on from several themes that I've talked about in many of these podcast episodes, the key to making change around your finances and your relationship with money all stems from awareness and curiosity in the first instance. Because if you don't know what you're dealing with, then you don't know what to change, or even what direction that you might need to head in to make a positive change. But it's okay to be angry about money as an emotion, and as a person, it's perfectly normal to have that feeling. What is important is how you deal with it and express it in a safe way so as not to cause problems for yourself or for others. If you've ever wanted to scream at your bank account, burn your budget, throw your phone across the room, then this episode is for you. Let's see how we can come up with some techniques that you maybe don't need to get quite so physical about it, but to be able to channel that for good. What I want to do is normalize financial rage. It's not irrational, it's honest. Women especially are taught to swallow any money emotions, not express them. So the technique that I've created and the service that I offer is around having a dedicated, intentional space, whether that's physical or emotional, where you can let it all out. So the benefit of doing that with somebody like myself, like a financial coach, is that you can get some level of feedback. But you don't have to have feedback. That can just be something that you learn to do and use for yourself. Screaming into a pillow, journal ranting, journaling rage, tearing up symbolic paper, smashing metaphorical plates are all great ways of expressing that rage in the moment that it's felt. But it's really important to acknowledge where that rage comes from, whether that's anger, whether that's grief, whether it's resentment or guilt, instead of shoving it down, instead of allowing it to perhaps show up in less appropriate spaces or impact other areas of your life or your finances. And that's definitely why having this space or creating this habit for yourself is necessary, because ultimately suppressed money emotions don't disappear, they leak, and then they show up in other habits, which isn't all necessarily about the money, which is often what we see, right? It shows up in people pleasing, it shows up in passive aggressive spending, it shows up in avoidance from dealing with things that you've got right in front of you that is super important, like paying HMRC, paying debt, dealing with credit cards. And it shows up in sabotaging your own financial progress and sabotaging your saving and investing habits, or maybe budgeting your spending and completely blowing it all in one go. So recognizing where this rage can come from is going to be the first place to start, if you can do that. Remember, it starts with awareness and curiosity, but it can come from a great number of places, and where that comes from for you is going to be unique to you, which means that it's okay, it's normal, because it's normal to you. That is your reality. It can come from childhood conditioning, from not having a say. I had some coaching sessions with the client, and one of the big frustrations that she had from her childhood was she used to save at least half of her pocket money in a piggy bank that she had, that then one of her parents used to take that money from the piggy bank, promised to give it back, and then never did. So that really impacted what she learnt about saving money. And if I save, someone takes it away from me, so it's just safer if I spend. So understanding where that belief came from was a big turning point, because then you can start to understand that, well, actually that belief isn't true. That was what I learned from that experience. But now that I recognise what happened, I can put that behind me and I can make changes for myself. It can come from experiencing financial abuse and control, where you physically have that, your own financial autonomy taken away from you. It can be massively, massively debilitating and cause a lot of anger and resentment in relationship. It can come from being the good girl who never says no. You can listen to my last podcast episode that I've recorded around financial boundaries. So if you find it very difficult to say no over time, then that can build up a significant amount of resentment. It can also stem from feeling trapped or just resentful generally, but not being allowed to express it, or not being allowed a voice or an equal place at the table in some financial relationships, whether that's in a marriage, whether that's in a business situation. It's important that you're very clear on what you want and what is fair for you, and that is then expressed in a safe way. So the rage room technique can release anger at yourself. So quite often I see a lot of blame when habits are understood, sort of looking back at the lost money or the opportunity cost of, why didn't I see this sooner? I'm an intelligent human being. Why on earth didn't I stop this? Why on earth haven't I spoken up before now? A rage room can be a great way of acknowledging that that's something that's in the past, but that's something that we're changing now. We can deal with and release anger at others. Why did you leave me with this? In relationships, or where marriages are broken down. And I've had clients that have been saddled with debt from a marriage because of joint financial arrangements that have been put in place. And when things are separated from a financial point of view, there is some element of the assets get divided up, but so do the liabilities. So sometimes we can end up being saddled with something that isn't our own. Anger at others as well, in terms of being expected to always pick up any financial slack that might appear in budgets, always being expected to top up the joint account, for example, depending upon how your finances are managed. Anger at the system is something that I see quite a lot, especially with business owners. And we're coming up to a time in the UK where we've got the budget that's been released at the end of November. So I'm recording this early on in November 2025. Why is it so hard? Why are the rules always stacked against me? I try so hard, but it feels at every turn there's something getting in the way. There's something stopping me from achieving what I want. I work so hard and yet I pay so much in tax. What is the point? It's about safety as well, to some extent, to be able to give all of your time to work so hard towards something and feel as though you've got little to show for it at the end. Stored grief as well, particularly in situations where you might have generational patterns of financial behaviour that you feel like you're carrying, shame and panic around debt, for example, or past behaviours that you feel like you're getting to grips with in some respect, but the feeling of that shame is still weighing quite heavy on your shoulders. All of it gets to come out in a rage room session. So when it comes to creating one of these sessions for yourself, it's about creating them in a safe way for you, first of all, creating one physically. So a sense of not being overheard, being able to have a confidential rant, if that's exactly how you want to do it. So it's about finding space to be able to do that, whether you can do that in your office, whether you know you've got certain times of the day or the week where you've got the house to yourself and you can rant. It might be locking yourself in your car, driving somewhere, closing and locking the doors and being able to do it there. or even doing it on a walk. If you live in a secluded enough area where that would be safe, then we can create a space. It's about creating sort of rituals around a money rage room to be able to work through this in your own space. Setting yourself up emotionally for a rage room is super important. So whether you do that journaling, whether you do that by writing the notes out, whether you do that using voice notes, it could be something that you set using a transcription app or just the voice recorder on your phone. You set to record and you just start. So it might be that you know you've got this time coming up. You make a list as things occur to you, maybe using the notes app on your phone to keep things safe and secure for yourself, and then just talking and not censoring yourself, letting it all come out. Just the act of being able to vocalize and say all of those things that are really playing on your mind can be so incredibly freeing. But to be able to do it in a way that you could then perhaps listen back to or read back over the transcription, to be able to spot patterns at a later date, is also a really useful and powerful tool. You can write letters that you might not necessarily send if it's directed at a particular individual, and then you can symbolically burn those letters so that they can't be read by anyone else. Symbolically, writing it down and burning is a great way of letting go of a particular issue. It's a great way of knowing that that's come out of your system, and we are literally letting that feeling go up in smoke, because it isn't something that you have to carry anymore. It's something that we can release with love and allow to be spread out into the elements. Punching a cushion, sobbing it out, again in a safe place, but being able to have some form of release from your body physically. If we have those pent up feelings that we're carrying with us, it's inevitable that those are going to leak at some point if we continue to keep them locked up. Set a timer. It's treating the rage room as a container, setting a time on that, how much you're giving to raging, ranting, journaling, writing, whatever it's going to be, allowing yourself a set amount of time and then stopping. And at that point we can then look back and reflect if that's what you want to do. Completely shut the journal, put it to one side, walk away if that feels even better. But putting a time on it can also mean that it doesn't need to be overwhelming. This doesn't have to be a spill your guts, pour your heart out, hour-long journaling session that you're going to get really deep and dirty with. This can just be something that right now, this is really frustrating me and I want to be able to let it out. So this can obviously apply to not just money rage, but it's a great way of managing your emotions and self-regulating for any area of your life. Being able to have a space where you know you have that time protected, you have the ritual set up, you have the space, the peace, the secluded space to be able to do that for yourself and feel safe, which is above and beyond the most important part of this process. The last thing you're going to want to be doing is feeling overheard or knowing that somebody might walk in on you mid-rage. It's not going to help anybody. So we can imagine if we're going through this process, one of the great things to be able to visualize from the offset is what this might feel like at the other side. So I might feel guilty about the fact that I'm going to start ranting or writing about a loved one, but the idea is that it's something that I can at least then process, whether that's in the written word or speaking it out loud. It can be processed, and we are just by working through that process, we can perhaps have a different perspective. We can perhaps, because we're hearing something that we've just got in our head, or we're writing something out by hand, it helps our brain to work through that process in itself. So to come then out of the other side, what we can expect to feel is some level of calm clarity. Not only have we spoken it and we've said it out loud, Maybe it doesn't sound quite as bad as it felt when we're saying something out loud. Maybe we can actually get some clarity in the same way as when we explain something to another person. We might have a better understanding ourselves, or we can certainly show ourselves that we understand something if we can explain it to another person. By ranting and saying something out loud and just allowing those words to flow, we can actually come to some form of conclusion to a particular issue, which can be super valuable. It's a great way to regulate your nervous system in the same way as some people like to sing, some people like to chant, some people like to meditate. This is another form. Meditation might not be sufficient in this situation if you've got those feelings that you're hanging on to. So being able to go through a physical process in this way instead could be something that works particularly well for you. Some of the feedback that I've got from clients that have done it on their own is that they had a surprising sense of empowerment. Just being able to say something out loud in the complete safety that nobody's going to hear you feels really empowering. To be able to vocalize and hear yourself say those words can be a massive first step to, now that I have vocalized it, now that I have tried to make some sense out of it and got some clarity, now what? What is going to be the next step for me now that I realize how important that is to me, or how much that feels like unfair, or there's a sense of injustice with a particular situation? So then what? We're allowing our brain to begin to process this for us. And having that time, that dedicated time, can be the first step to setting a money date to review finances, review spending, review budgets. It's about building in space to your everyday to make decisions. Obviously, we're talking about financial decisions, but that doesn't need to necessarily be what this space is used for. It can be developed to share as an experience with your family in other areas, for example. If you can get the benefit from it and feel that for yourself, that could be something that you do more with the experience. But for this particular rage room situation, it gives you the space to make decisions, not from chaos, not from retaliation or a reactionary space. It comes from a place of calm. It comes from a place of ownership and having actually really thought something through before changes need to be made. So it's a super, super powerful exercise that I love providing space for, but I love the feedback that I get from clients that do take the time to do this for themselves. Make this part of your money habits, your money rituals that you do for yourself. I think in closing, it's really important to highlight that your anger is valid. If this is a feeling that you have around finances, around financial relationships, it's okay to feel angry. What's not okay, and what can cause problems for you later, or sooner rather than later, but can cause issues, is when we hold on to that anger or we lose sight of what the cause of it is. So being able to process and deal with it is a great way of being able to move on and develop as an individual. You're allowed to feel all of it. It is part of being human beings, part of being a person. But when you release it, when you let go of that anger and shame and guilt and frustration, you make space for your power to return. You make space for better decision making, for clarity in other financial areas. So give it a go. I would love to hear what you think of it. I'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for joining me today on Breaking Financial Chains. Remember, you have the power to transform your relationship with money one step at a time. If this episode helped you, please subscribe and leave a review to help others find their path to financial freedom. I'm Tanya, your financial wing woman, and I'll see you next week.